Awesome. Yeah, well, thanks again, Jen and SAS Soccer for the opportunity to present a little bit about the journey, obviously at CONCACAF, but I think more importantly, what how we've been able to get there. There's a lot of work from a lot of amazing people, not just myself, doing great work when it comes to futsal behind the scenes, and also why I feel so strongly of how futsal can be our superpower as a province, and why we must invest and really take it on as a sport that can really help us elevate to the next level. So I hope that I'm able to transmit that during the presentation, and to folks that are here on the call, please also feel free to ask questions at the end, and this is more of a hopefully a conversation, discussion, and also a celebration of futsal in our province. So a little bit about myself, and I always like to start with this because I think it provides a lot of context into why I'm so passionate about futsal, and why I'm so passionate about elevating our province. I was born and raised in a small island in Mexico called Isla Mujeres, off the Caribbean side of Quintana Roo, the state, and right in front of Cancun. So very similar kind of feeling as the Saskatchewan people, kind of small community with not a lot of opportunities, and we had to kind of think outside the box or create our own opportunities. I was fortunate enough to be able to play 3 years of professional soccer in Mexico, third and second division, while I was kind of in high school. And then my mom being Canadian, I had the dual nationality. I decided that I wanted to kind of explore a little bit of my Canadian roots, and I decided to come to Saskatchewan, really just because I had family. I had no clue where Saskatchewan was, to be honest. And I decided to play 5 years. I did my 5 years of university, while going through engineering. I see Abu is on the call, and myself and Abu were teammates as well, and we both went through engineering. So that was from 2007 to 2011, and it was an amazing experience. With it, I was able to represent Canada 2 times at the FISU Games in 2009 in Serbia and 2011 in Shenzhen. So it was a really cool opportunity. I had opportunities with the Mexican U17 national team, but then to be able to represent my Canadian roots was such a special moment, and it kind of gave me a little bit of a glimpse of what international level is like, and the feeling of singing your anthem before a game. From that point on, I graduated, and I knew I wasn't going to be an engineer. Probably 2 years left in my degree. I knew that engineering wasn't going to be for me, but I wanted to obviously finish the degree, and as that opened up many other doors. So I was then an assistant coach with the men for 2 years, and then the opportunity came about to be the head coach of our U of S program, and I didn't anticipate being there for as long as I've been, but it's probably been one of the best decisions I've had in my life. Working with some phenomenal people, amazing people that are on the call, but also just the opportunity to really create something special. And we're kind of in that final step of making our vision a reality. And then again, just how life works out. Kind of, I never felt or never thought that being in Saskatchewan, I would have the exposure, the opportunities to then be at the highest level. But I tell this to our players, you just never know who's watching. And this is why it's so important to believe. This is why it's important to dream big. And this is why it's important to do really high level intentional work. Is Carmelina Moscato, being the head coach, had started to follow our program and became really interested in just all the things that we were able to do with really limited resources, that she, being the head coach, reached out in 2013 and asked me to be an assistant coach for Tigres, which is one of the top 10 clubs in the world. They actually just they beat Portland Thorns last night, so they made the CONCACAF final on Saturday against Gotham. So a massive club, and I was there for 6 months as an assistant coach. Great learnings, that I was then able to bring back to our program here at the U of S. And then again, just serendipitously, Canada Soccer decided to form a women's national team. And Alex De Rocha, I think, again, followed some of the work that we've been doing behind the scenes and asked me if I would be willing to be an assistant coach, which I did not hesitate to be able to be in. And And yeah, so very interesting journey. And hopefully you'll be able to connect the dots as to why I'm passionate and why I do what I do. So I felt it's really important, especially maybe the people on the call know what this is, but if it's going to be shared with a lot of different organizations, is to educate a little bit about what futsal is. Again, I think more and more people are understanding what it is, but futsal is really a team sport that's practiced between 5 players. So you have 4 players on the outfield and one goalkeeper. It's played on a 40 by 20 meter dimension court. Halves are 20 minutes with stop time. And so it's really a mixture of soccer, handball, water polo, basketball, and hockey concepts. So this is why I think the general neutral Canadian fan loves it once they're introduced to it, because there's a lot of elements that maybe they didn't play soccer, but they can understand from having played hockey, having played basketball. The name futsal actually comes from a Spanish word, which is called futbol sala, which means soccer in a gymnasium or soccer in a gym. Um, and so many people think that it actually originated in Brazil, because that's where a lot of the top end players end up coming from, but it actually was originated in Uruguay by a physical education professor that wanted to just keep his kids active during school hours. So the picture here on the right is actually the stadium that we played in Guatemala. So 7,500 fans capacity, and it was an amazing surface and such a cool venue. I have a video I want to share. I think sometimes I don't do it justice by explaining it. So I think if we watch the video together, we'll be able to maybe see what futsal truly is. So let's see if this works. I hope it works. Let me know if it does.
If you're someone that suffers from having sensitive teeth, but you want them whiter, I recommend.
Is it working, Jen?
Yeah, it's working. As soon as I think you
Okay.
get through that ad, it should be okay.
Okay, perfect.
Yeah, once you hit. Yeah.
All right. I'll put the...
Yeah. The black people gonna make it stop. Rhythmically we must stop. But hip hop makes up for shop. But what's shop? Eat it like a shot. Nah, penetrate through your body. And rhythmically we must stop. But hip hop makes up for shop. What's shop? So yes, y'all. We can keep a fucking push, y'all. And we won't stop until we get y'all. We won't stop until we get y'all. Until we get y'all. And if One, two, three, four, several times. Everyone to live by every time. Bring your things, don't be better in your mind. Bring every day. You want every someone. The fire, we won't stop till we get y'all. We won't stop until we get y'all. Till we get y'all. Say it. Drop, in my daily operation. Gotta put in work with this crazy operation. Gotta keep it moving, got the motivation. Gotta rock the basic, but my relation with my team is moving, and doing it right. I'm in the lab every day till the night. That's stop, moving the fucking business. Yo, I'm a solo remix. She's not like me.
All right, I'll go back to the presentation. 2 seconds. Okay. Perfect. So I can't recall how many times I've watched that video, but I love that video because it just shows the power of what futsal is as a sport. But for many of the clubs that might be here on the call, they're also soccer clubs, and you could hopefully see the cross pollination and the relevance of how futsal impacted also a lot of the soccer moves, a lot of the techniques, and a lot of the development of some of those amazing players that we maybe only knew about from a soccer perspective, but actually, truth be told, their initial stages from development actually started from a futsal perspective. So I think it just shows the power of futsal. Yes, one as a sport to develop, but also two of what it can produce in terms of soccer players. So I really hope that that kind of gave you an idea of the creativity, the movement, the technique on demand that a lot of the players develop by playing this sport. So, how do we get to this final culmination of futsal in Saskatchewan? Well, I'll share a little bit of my story and a little bit of kind of the really impactful moments that have been able to allow myself and the three players that made Team Canada to be where we're at. Because I hope that people understand that this was not just a overnight thing. This has been many years in the making with many people behind the scenes working really hard. So how did it start? Well, in 2014, as I said, I became the head coach or the co-head coach of the U of S women's soccer program in May of the year going into the season. So really limited time to prepare a team and to recruit. But one thing I quickly understood was that our team didn't have the technical ability or the creativity to be within the players to be a team that could really compete against bigger schools like UBC, like Trinity, U of A that had perennial contenders. And I also knew that in Saskatchewan in the winter it gets really cold and we don't have a lot of access to outdoor fields. So for me, futsal was an immediate thought that I had to implement into our off-season development program. So why we did it was one, to increase the technical skill sets of our players and increasing their creativity on the ball. We also had very limited accessibility, and we still continue to have limited accessibility to train year round indoors, and also the cost. The cost was a big barrier to what we had as a budget. But we also wanted to bring something new and fresh to our players so that they really embrace being high performance players. If we wanted to compete against the bigger schools that had a lot of success, we needed to embrace a year round program of being high performance players. And futsal was a way of breaking up the sport and giving them something new, something fresh to develop. Erica Heinmarsh, one of the players that made the national team, she was part of my first 3 years as a head coach. And at the time, she had no clue about what futsal was. And now you see her 10 years or more down the line, and you can see how amazing of a futsal player she is. So again, I think we really started to make an impact on her. From then in 2015, what I've learned is for you to have success, you can't do it alone. You have to be able to surround yourself with people that align to your vision. I was really fortunate to meet Jaime Mesa, who's on the call, Tiago Prado, Abumir, who was already with me as my assistant coach at the university level. and also Luz Marina, who's unfortunately passed away, who was Jaime's wife, who we created this really special group of people, and Jaime had already started the Saskatoon Futsal League as a member, but we kind of all aligned with the vision of wanting to build futsal in our province. Well, initially in Saskatoon and then within our province. So some of the things we did in that first year, and there's more than what I will just mention, but I felt these were maybe the three highlights. Where we created a U14 pilot project. We wanted to start with youth because we feel that that's where the future is, and they were probably going to be the ones more open to really doing futsal, but also we would see the most growth within the youth adapting to futsal. So you can see the picture on the right. We also ran the first referee clinic to prepare for our first fall mini adult league, which you see in the bottom picture. I think there was four teams. That was maybe my playing days still. But it was we played in high school gyms, and it's a great start to what futsal was in Saskatoon. Um, 2016, I would say I classified it as working silently behind the scenes. So we continued to elevate the profile of futsal really on a local level in Saskatoon through our SFL organization. So some of the highlights that we did was we ran a free festival for U8s, U10s, U12s, U14 kids. We had about 50 kids participate. And again, our focus was to initiate with youth because we felt we could impact their development a lot quicker, and they would be a lot more receptive to change and to adapting futsal into their programming. We also introduced the first U11 and U13 exhibition fall league, boys and girls. We had our first introductory futsal coaching clinic. So Jaime, being the mentor coach, kind of ran the first coaching course, and I supported, which is the picture here. Peter Morris with TD Soccer, who's again a futsal specific academy, and many other members were part of it. And we also delivered the first Futsal World Cup tournament with 8 teams participating. So again, continue to elevate the profile of futsal on a local level. And then I would say from 2017 to 2019 really was the start of Saskatchewan futsal at an elite level. So we started to elevate the profile of futsal as a province now at a national level. So in 2017, we put a team together, Olympia SK, a group of guys that we started to train, and Jaime was the head coach. And we were the first province outside of Quebec and Ontario to participate at Futsal Nationals. And it was such a cool moment because we actually made the final that year. We eliminated Ontario, and we got to be in the final against Quebec. We ended up losing 7-4, but just the sheer opportunity to compete, not get blown out, and yet alone eliminate Ontario, I think send like huge ripple effect across the country, because in 2018, going from 2 provinces historically only competing to then Saskatchewan, to now Saskatchewan having a lot of success, we saw 8 provinces all of a sudden participate. And this is what I've learned is you always need courageous people that are trailblazers. When you have courageous people that do something that hasn't been done and accomplish something that people didn't think was possible, it really provides confidence, and it really creates a ripple effect for others to want to be part of. And so from 2017 to 2018, I really want to say that I think Saskatchewan played a huge role in elevating profile futsal at a national level. In 2018, we returned again with our Olympia skate team, and you see in the picture Matthew Hinachu, who's now our director of high performance. He was a player, and so you can start to see maybe a lot of the influence and a lot of the aspects of how we, again, the people involved in elevating futsal have started to really become mentors to the up and coming coaches. And we were able to medal again. So we won bronze. We went back in 2019, and this time we finished fourth in the country. But all 3 years in a row, amazing performances. And I would say we were leading into 2020, and I personally, I think we had probably the best team we ever had. And then COVID hit, and we weren't able to go to nationals. But from our performances, I think something that's really key to mention is we had 3 initial players, Jade Tomchuk, Mitch Bausch and Nikki Baikas pre-selected to the national team, and then Jay Tomchak actually got an opportunity to go with the men's national team to Costa Rica for a Costa Rica camp. It wasn't an official competition, but I think it's really cool to see that we've also had a male player represent our country when it comes to futsal. And then at this time, from 2014 all the way to 2019 at the university, we continued to use futsal, but mostly as a developmental tool. There was nothing for us to really strive to compete in or play or try to win because there was no competitions. But that was always my dream. When we started futsal in 2014, my dream was always that at some point there would be nationals for women's. There would be a national women's team. There would be a FIFA World Cup. And so for it to come alive 7, 8 years after was such a cool moment. So in 2022, with the inclusion of the women's national competition, we were now able to really start to focus on developing a more competitive local league, and also coach futsal as a sport, not just use it as a developmental tool for soccer players, but actually treat it as a sport in itself with its tactical considerations and a lot of the different competitive pieces that you need to consider. So the way we went about it, again, was we're a province that we cannot do what Ontario, BC, Quebec do. We need to think outside the box and we need to embrace our uniqueness. And part of our uniqueness was always trying to create our competitive division in the Saskatoon Futsal Women's League organically and elevate the standards. So what we decided to do, along with other key players like Michelle Keane and Abu that was coaching the Impact SK team, was to create two really strong teams: Saskatoon Green and White, which was our current university players, and then Impact SK, which ended up transforming into a lot of our alumni players. And this is where I think the Saskatoon Futsal League, again, the people that were involved made such a critical decision, was to make the league more competitive and prepare the teams. We actually combined the women's division with U15 boys. So many times we focus so much on standards and administrative load, and we create barriers that diminish the on-field product. And this is where I give a lot of credit. As a league, we were really open and being flexible to changing how we do things for the betterment of the sport, for the betterment of the players. And so the women's teams were combined with U15 boys to provide different challenges, different opportunities of development, and also to create more teams to provide more variety. And I think that was such a pivotal decision in terms of elevating also the players' abilities. So in 2023, SK Impact was the team that represented us at nationals, and they won bronze. In 2024, it was Saskatoon Green and White that qualified, again, beating SK Impact in the provincial final, and we were able to win. We were able to become national champions, which I think was such a historical moment for our province because it just showed that you can have success in Saskatchewan and you can win and you can compete against maybe some of these bigger provinces. And then in 2025, SK Impact beat Saskatoon Green and White in the provincial final, and they end up being champions, which is such an amazing feat because all of a sudden, in 3 years that we've had women's national competitions, 2 to 3 years, we've actually won it. And the only other year that nationals happened, it was the Quebec team that ended up winning. So I think this in itself proves why we can be a powerhouse as a province when it comes to futsal, but it also proves that when you have special people aligned to a vision, good things can happen. And I have no doubt in my mind, because of this, is the only way we, myself and the players included, got some credibility, got even the opportunity to make a final camp and have the opportunity to then showcase what we're all about. So 2025, 10 years into my role as a head coach and having the vision, for me, this is when dreams become reality, because this was always a vision that initially we had, but 7 years in, it wasn't even on our radar. 3 months ago, it wasn't even on our radar because Canada Soccer named Alex De Rocha the head coach of our futsal women's national team at the end of January 2025. I remember I was actually away with my wife and my little daughter at the lake. And he called me asking if I would be part of his staff, and I had no hesitation to be part of the staff. Why? Because I had already experienced what it feels like to represent your country at an international level, and there's no price point that you can put on that. It was going to make my life a lot more busier, but it was such an amazing opportunity. And so at the end of the day, how did the national team come about? Well, as Alex De Rocha met with, I think, every provincial organization lead and asked for what are they doing in terms of futsal, who are people that he could have on staff. And so he ended up making a coaching staff of myself, Natalie Fleming, who's based out of New Brunswick. Alex is based in Montreal. Drew Nick, who's also based in Quebec. Nicole Carvalho, who's based in Ontario, and Kit Silodopoulos, who's the assistant coach with the Forge and also based out of, I guess, Ontario, but in Quebec. And that was the coaching staff that we had. And so how we went about it was in Quebec on the east side, they had a camp for the Ontario, the Quebec, and all the Atlantic provinces players. So there was about 28 to 30 players. I think maybe someone's just not muted. Then maybe you could monitor that. Someone new, I think, that came in. Then on the BC, they don't do a lot of futsal. So there was no ID camps there. My role as an assistant coach was to oversee a lot of the Western Canada scouting. So in Alberta, at the college level, ACAC level, they actually have futsal provincials. So I scouted all the Alberta futsal provincials. Here in Saskatchewan, myself and Matthew Hinachu, we created a pool of players that we felt had potentially the skill sets of what Alex was looking for a showcase game. And then in Manitoba, they did the same. And from all those 4 events, plus also recommendations of coaches elsewhere internationally, we had a Canadian player that's living in Spain that came to camp. We had a final camp in Montreal at the end of March with 32 players. We had 4 players represent Saskatchewan. We initially had 6 players identified, but 2 players weren't able to make it. One for school commitments, and another one, Nami Nguyen. She's actually also being tracked by the Vietnamese national soccer team, so she didn't want to put that in jeopardy. So we ended up having 4 players make the final camp, which was Jade Humpha, Jaden Steinhauer, Erica Heinmarsh, and Jenna Stacy. And from that point, we as a coaching staff selected the 14 players to go to CONCACAF qualifiers. And 3 out of the 4, Jade, Jaden, and Erica, made that final roster. So first and foremost, such a historical moment, first to have 4 players called into camp. Or 6 players identified, 4 called into camp. But then to have 3 out of 14 players selected for the CONCACAF qualifiers, I think that ratio was such an amazing feat. In total, we had three players from Saskatchewan, 9 from Quebec, and then 2 kids that are from Ottawa that play NCAA. So, and in my mind, since the 18 years that I've been here in Saskatchewan, that has never happened for our province. So that in itself was such a proud moment. But then, as you guys hopefully followed our journey, going into Guatemala, we really only had a 2-day camp after the final selection. And why I want to share this is for people to give context and for people to understand really the magnitude of what this special group of people, coaches, and players accomplished. Because it is something that even to this day, I still can't quite believe what we were able to do. So we had a 2-day camp in Montreal, April 22nd and 23rd. We had 2 training sessions and an exhibition game against a U15 boys team. In Quebec, they play a lot of high school futsal. They don't play high school soccer at all. It's just futsal. So they have a really good level. And we played U15 boys. During the selection camp, we also played boys. It's funny because I think in total ended up playing 5 games against U15, U16 boys. We didn't win a single game. So our confidence wasn't, I would say, the greatest going into Guatemala because we hadn't won a single game. I think the best we had done was maybe tie. But we were playing boys and we were getting challenged. And I think connecting the dots now backwards again was such a critical decision that we had as a coaching staff because it prepared our players to really learn how to compete against players that might be technically or physically better than us. And it gave us an opportunity to really focus on being defensively disciplined, which I think for me is why we won the CONCACAF qualifiers. So we went to Guatemala about 5 days early to acclimatize, to get some training sessions in, and we were able to manage to play a club team, the Guatemalan club champions. We ended up winning that game 5-0. And they didn't have their national team players there, though, because obviously they were with the Guatemalan national team. So it gave us a little bit of confidence, but we weren't quite sure how we were going to fare against some of the top national teams like Costa Rica, like US in our group. But at least it was good to get that winning experience, that winning feeling, and kind of gave us some silent confidence, I would say. From that point on, we had Costa Rica and US in our group. Costa Rica was ranked number 1, US was ranked number 2. And then we had Honduras also in our group. And if you followed our journey, we ended up losing to Costa Rica 3-2. We played such a great game for all of our players. That was their first international game, first international exposure. So for us, that was a moral victory. Losing 3-2 was such a moral victory because we felt like we could compete and that we weren't going to get blown out. Because that was our goal. Our goal going into this competition was to play with pride and not get blown out so that people could hopefully feel like futsal had potential to grow. It's crazy to say that. We played Honduras. We won 6-0. We were able to get our first international win. Then our big game was against the US. We knew that we had to beat them to make it through. And we ended up winning 3-1. It was such an amazing game. Erica Heimarsh scored the third goal on a really good attacking transition moment. And that solidified our opportunity to be in the semifinals and play one game against Mexico to go to a World Cup. Getting out of the group already was success for us because no one gave us a chance to get out of that group. Everyone was already pretty much saying that Costa Rica US was going to be the final. So then we play against Mexico in the semifinals. We were losing 3-0 at half. I think our players were nervous and maybe the moment, like this was the biggest game for all of us, staff included, to ever go to a World Cup. And I think the coaching staff was so good in terms of understanding that at halftime, all we needed is to give confidence to our players and to tell them to forget about the game plan, to just go out and enjoy the moment. So long story short, Jade hadn't played. She wasn't having didn't have a great game against the US and she was not starting, but we had a feeling that she could contribute as a winger, maybe not so much as a defender, and she scored the first goal that got us going, and then in 4 minutes we turned the score around. We were winning 4-3. Then they scored with 1.8 seconds, 4-4. We managed to go to penalties. Jaden Steinhauer was our penalty specialist. She comes in, makes 2 saves. Jade scores her PK, and we end up beating Mexico in the PKs to qualify for a World Cup. And then against Panama, we ended up winning 8-2. So both, I would say, underdog teams, ourselves and Panama, managed to make it to a World Cup. So this is, again, a 10-year thing, and this is the culmination of a project of many amazing local people in Saskatchewan that have helped elevate futsal. Jaime Mesa, Abumir, Amy Prokop at the university level, Luz Marina, Tiago Prado, and some of the other academies at TD Soccer too, for believing in what this project is. And I really hope that in some way, shape, or form that you also feel like you've contributed to this success. So what are the benefits of futsal? Why am I passionate about futsal, and why I feel like here in this province we have to really implement it and really jump on board? some of the best people in the world say it. Xavi, one of the best midfielders for Barcelona. Arsene Wenger, one of the legends in the coaching game and now part of FIFA. And again, I won't read this out, but you can read it for yourself. And the image I really wanted to show is this is what a futsal court looks like, represents compared to a soccer field. So you can see why the decision making, the constant technique under pressure, the constant transitions, the constant opportunities to expose players scoring goals or having to defend goals happens a lot. And if you're doing that a lot more, you're inherently going to get better by making mistakes. So for me, it's such a, not obvious, but such a impactful piece that we need to develop within our players. Ideally, and here I tried to resume this into 10 key things of why futsal is such an important piece, not just again for the sport, but also to develop better soccer players. And hopefully you can share this with the parents and the coaches within your organization. First and foremost, the ball touches. There's actually been a statistical study that compared futsal to outdoor soccer, and players in futsal touch the ball 210% more often than if you would in soccer. So players feel like they can actually impact the game. Kids can feel like they have an influence on the game. And I think that's such an important piece because they enjoy it more. Ball control. So again, the limited space, the constant opponent pressure, the touch lines helps you improve on your ball control skills and technique. Now, this is something that I really want to make sure people understand. Futsal is not indoor soccer. For you to see the benefits of futsal, you have to fully implement the futsal rules and you have to fully invest in the proper equipment of futsal, meaning a futsal ball is a bit heavier, meaning buying the proper nets and understanding what the rules are. Okay. I think in the past, what I've seen is so many people have called futsal indoor soccer. And so they don't get the full benefits of it because they're actually not applying what futsal truly is. So if there's anything that you take away out of this presentation is implement futsal, but get curious about learning the rules and really invest into the proper equipment of what futsal is or what futsal needs. Okay. A speed of play and then enhanced decision making. As I said, futsal provides so many transitional moments, both attacking and defending, and there's always an outcome. You'll always get exposed really quickly. In soccer, you might make a mistake, but you might have a player be able to bail you out of that mistake because of the distance that the opponent has to travel to score a goal. In futsal, you make a mistake like we did against the US, all of a sudden it's the back of the net. You're going to take a lot more responsibility. You're going to get more curious to want to not make that mistake again. And you're probably going to take a lot more self-ownership to develop your game. So I think, again, let's take the game back to the kids. This starts to provide that. Again, the constant movement, the mandatory support, you constantly have to be moving to provide options. You actually can't go back to the keeper more than once. So again, that forces players to think forward, to play forward. I go and watch a lot of soccer games as part of my university job, and a lot of teams possess the ball, but they always go backwards. They never go over half. Last time I checked, the way you win games is by scoring goals, not by possessing the ball. So I think this is what futsal again creates. It creates an urgency to want to attack, to want to go forward and finding ways to go forward. There's also continuity and constant transitional moments, as I said. The decision making and the required movement of the ball, so important. Players can't hide. In soccer, if you're a winger and you don't get the ball for 10, 15 minutes, you might still be impacting the game. In futsal, that doesn't happen. Sometimes you go for 1 minute, you might not get the ball, but you're impacting the game with your movement, with your defending intensity. Also, something that we're not good at in Canada is scoring goals, although it's getting better now on the men's side. Now that Christine Sinclair retired, then we're struggling. That's the reality as a women's team. And futsal provides a lot more shooting opportunities. So higher frequencies of attacking the final third on a smaller net will give the players a lot more repetitions to shoot and to work on their accuracy. and also to develop different techniques. I'll never forget this. The first goal, and I think Lee Cormish, you're on the call, and I know you always go to World Cups, is Oscar scored for Brazil against Croatia in 2014. And the goal was actually a toe punt outside the box that the Croatian keeper was not set and ready. And how many times, if we think about soccer coaches, we always tell kids, don't punt the ball, don't shoot it with your toe punt. And I always question, why not? It's a resource. It's another technique that could get you success. So again, futsal, a lot of the top players always toe punt the ball because you can get more force, but also it provides less time for the keeper to get set and read the shot. So adapting new techniques and being creative, futsal brings that. Encourage learning and less risk of injury. So again, similar to basketball, you can't just foul for the sake of fouling. If you get up to 6 fouls, the opponent team has a extended penalty kick shot. So it teaches defenders to have to defend more discipline, to learn when to foul and when not to foul, when to actually be in control of their body to close down and not close down. And obviously from an attacking standpoint, it also allows players to express themselves and be more open to being creative because they're not going to constantly get fouled. A little bit of a side note against Mexico. So we end up being tied 4-4 at the end of regulation. And when you go into overtime, the fouls continue. If you go from first half to second half, they always reset. But when you go from second half into overtime, they continue. We were on 5 fouls. And all I was praying was to not commit a 6th foul and get to PKs. I knew, just because I knew this player and I knew that she was phenomenal, that if we got to PKs, Jaden was going to make 2 saves. Case in point, she ends up making 2 saves and we end up winning in PKs. But I don't think many people even knew that. And it was such an important piece of this whole journey. And then I think that the most important piece is it's fun. You ask any player, even myself, I now play. I preferred futsal over soccer any day of the week. Why? Because I get the ball a lot more. I can influence the game a lot more. And it's just that much more enjoyable. So I think that's such a key piece of what futsal can provide if we're talking at the youth level. And again, examples, not just that, but now for the coaches on the call, a lot of the tactics that we see nowadays in soccer at the next level have actually been implemented from futsal. So how you press in a diamond, how do you play on the rotations? The new strategy within futsal is to play without a striker, kind of like a false nine, so the bottom picture, because it becomes really hard to defend. Because if they man mark you, there's always space in behind. If you look at if you're like me and you're really curious and you like to kind of look at obscure leagues and try to see the trends, in Germany, at the second division, there's a team that builds out exactly like a futsal tactic. And it's actually having 4 players at the back and then 6 players up high and intentionally leaving this yellow space open to allow for rotations and movements off the ball. And then on the left side, you've probably seen this activity because we all do it. And probably Guardiola made it really relevant, is a 4v4 plus 3 activity that's all based on counter pressing. But he actually took the ideas from futsal and water polo. One of his actually assistant coaches has a background in water polo. So again, being open to cross-pollinating ideas and studying futsal to then make better decisions from a soccer perspective has been a big part of us as a program at the U of S. And I think it's part of the reason why we've also had a lot of success. So now, kind of towards the end of the presentation, why futsal in Saskatchewan can be our superpower. And I generally believe it, and I think we're proving it. It's one, the low cost to participate. It's so much cheaper to be able to rent a gym and to be able to play in gyms than maybe 11v11. And don't get me wrong, I'm not saying don't do soccer, but I'm saying if you don't have the resources or you don't have access to 11v11, focus on futsal. So one, low cost to participate, but also it helps players. Now, as a parent, I understand this a lot more. The cost to participate in multiple sports and have multi-sport focused athletes, I think is can be our superpower as a province, because it's already happening in small communities. Second, the infrastructure is available everywhere, even in the smallest communities in Saskatchewan. I've done a presentation up in Pelican Narrows, up in like super north in Saskatchewan, and they don't have soccer facilities like we have in Saskatoon in the big cities, but they do have a gym, and gyms are part of schools. So that's all you need for futsal. So that means that the smallest community in Saskatchewan can implement futsal and not be behind from an infrastructure piece. If we look at it on a grand schematic piece, that's the biggest barrier that we have in Canada. We do not have enough sport infrastructure to sustain the level of performance that we want to achieve. Maybe for hockey it does, but most definitely for soccer and futsal, there is none. But new infrastructure needed can also be used for multi-purpose and built at low cost. So sometimes building the infrastructure deficit needs to be started by governments. This is an easier sell if you can include a volleyball pitch, a futsal court, and a basketball court all in one building. And I think then it provides a lot more realistic ways of going to your government and getting this built. Our realities, our long and harsh winter conditions force us to be indoors all year. UBC, that's our competitor at the university level, they don't do futsal because they don't have to go indoors. Now, they could choose to do futsal for the other elements, but they don't need to. We don't really have a choice. So I think, again, this is something that instead of complaining, we just got to embrace our uniqueness. The big one that I feel is that you need less numbers of players to make up teams and be competitive. So we saw it on the men's side. I think Yorkton this year won on the men's side to go to nationals. Our entire roster was 14 players, but realistically, Panama, they had 14 players. They only used a core 7 players to get them to a World Cup. I think most communities could find 5, 6, 7 players that are very committed to focus on the sport and not just have a team, but also be successful as a community. So I think this is such a key piece of what Saskatchewan can, or clubs in Saskatchewan can really buy into and really implement. And then, as I said, less injuries due to limited physical contact, which I know a lot of the parents would appreciate. For me, the most important one is futsal brings an opportunity to come back to unstructured play culture. And honestly, this is the secret to development. It is not about training more, but rather about playing more. I grew up on a small island. Like I said, I played professional. I didn't train until I was 16 years old, but I played every day, 4 to 5 years, futsal outdoors against adults. Okay, if you see the picture on the right, and you'll see Jade was part of this group, and Matthew and other elite players that have gone on to the next level, they were part of building that culture 8 years ago. Not because there was a national team, not because there was professional opportunities, but because they enjoyed the sport. And we had the right people being able to volunteer their time to create these opportunities for them. And that picture on the right, top right, allows you to then get to the bottom left and the bottom right corner. But it's 10 years in the making. And for me, this is why I'm so proud of what those girls have been able to accomplish, is because if you can see it, you can be it. And we now have 3 trailblazers paving the way. So I really, really hope that, again, communities in Saskatchewan and across the nation, if anything, are inspired to implement futsal, implement it in the right way, and to continue to develop and grow the sport. And obviously jump on our journey to go to World Cup, because it's gonna be tough. It's gonna be a lot of work, but it'll be an epic opportunity. So with no more than that, I want to leave you with this, and this is something that I've lived a lot the last 4 or 5 years, is sometimes all we need is an opportunity, and dreams can become a reality. So I'll stop sharing maybe, Jen, and I'll let you maybe, if anyone has